Phones in one country, very much like the phones in another. This, for example, could be a phone anywhere in the world. But what do tend to differ, and sometimes quite surprisingly, are the payphones. On the Champs-Élysées, Martin Cooper from the BT Paris office showed me how to use a France Telecom card phone. But this is a card box, so...
This is a card box that works in two different ways. You can either use it with a card that's like that, that's very similar to the British Green card, which is a debit card, or you can use it with a card that will actually send your communication costs back to your home telephone bill. It's taking the card, tells you how much credit you've got on the card on the display. You then tap your number in, and the amount of money that you've got left on the card is shown permanently.
What's the final row of buttons there?
That seems to be a standard dial pad, and they've added in a set of buttons, and when you ask the French PTT whether they're ever going to be used, they say it's possible. C'est possible.
C'est possible. The famous French c'est possible. From Paris to Frankfurt. And this time my guide is Nigel Williams. So how do the pay phones compare?
Well, let's just have a look for a bit of luck here. Remarkably similar, I would think. Prepayment, display for the amount of money entered, button and return tray for change. I think you find that very much like you see in the UK. No surprise, we copied it from them. But they had it some years before us.
And this is...
Well, this was one up to BT. This is their version of the card telephone. Slightly more modern than ours in appearance, but then of course it has come later into Germany than our card telephone. But again, there are certain similarities, I think. Except I would comment that, again, the kiosk is substantial, and given that we're in a busy city street...
Built to last.
Built to last, and we're in a busy city street, I think ours would unfortunately be in a worse mess than here. Finally, a bit of humour. I think this is the ambulance and the fire. One way for ambulance, the other way for the fire brigade. Given that simplicity, I wonder how many false alarms we would have in the UK. But not so much of a problem in Germany.
I see there's no vandalism here.
Very little.
A bit of rubbish,
dirt, a bit of dirt, and there's a little bit of graffiti on the side here, but you know, that's pretty rare, and this is in a public square in what is regarded as a problem city in Germany.
Quite a violent city.
Yes,
by
German standards, one of the most violent, with not a very good crime record.
Yet they respect their phone boxes.
Yes, yes, which gives Bundespost a lot easier task than we have. It is not a national sport of ripping apart phone boxes. It has become so in our country.
No one knows more about payphone villains than Dennis Gotts from BT's fearless investigation department. Dennis, this is your black museum for vandalism, fraud and theft. Now, with all these degrees of villainy here, are you winning?
Winning is a difficult term. It's something that BT, from the very top, is determined to do something about.
Yes.
Now, these boxes came from a city centre in the north of England, not a rural box in an out-of-the-way place, but a city centre box.
The thing is built like a tank, isn't it?
It's built like a tank. It's very, very heavy gauge metal, and of course inside there you've still got to get into the cash compartment. This particular one, as you can see, was acetylene all the way around the outside, and then the cash container was inside there. That too had been acetylene, and that was in the city centre of Sheffield. So this just serves to highlight the extent to which the thieves will go to get into the cash compartment.
So we're talking about large quantities of available cash on street corners, really.
We certainly are. When you think about whether it's defrauding telephone boxes or breaking into them using the tools that I've described, we've got 80,000 money boxes on street corners. That's what it amounts to.
Payphones are not a big part of any telecom company's business, but they are highly visible. And how they work can have a big effect upon how people think about the company that's running them. For instance, towards the end of 1987, when one of our payphones out of every 4 wasn't working, BT's image suffered enormously. So BT then made a promise that lots of people, including a lot of Fleet Street, didn't believe they could keep. Mike Bett told me how important it was to meet that promise.
When we promised that we would deliver a payphone service, is 90% serviceability. We did it, and we did it on time. That was symbolic for us, for our staff, for us to realise that when we promise something, we can deliver it. And it was actually very useful for the customers to notice.
Once it's been decided someone has to do something, someone has to go and do it. That someone was first of all Andy Green, the then National Payphones manager.
We were having some problems. We had a lot of people working very hard on analysis, a lot of people working very hard on keeping the boxes going, but we were having problems getting it together. So we were getting close to the edge, and we got a few people together and we looked at all the analysis, and we sat down and we had a real good brainstorming session. We worked out what the problems were, and we got down together and we tried to get the right solutions. The next thing was to get the field people in. It's very important in all these things to understand how much teamwork matters. So before we did anything, we had a lot of field people in to test the ideas. Were they practical? Could it work? Could we get it right? And then we went out and we put it into action across the country to great success.
For an inside view of a payphone, my guide was a Liverpool engineer, Carl Sinnott.
Now on the back of the door we have the keypad, what we call the switch hooks, the tone caller and the locking mechanism. On this middle section we have a runway and a validator. Now the coins come in through the validator and they check the size and the metal content and verify what value they are, and depending on the value they are passed into this runway. All those processes are controlled by this CPU board at the back. It's basically like a computer.
You spend your life looking after these things. What are the most common faults and worries?
When I started on the payphones about 3 years ago, it was quite depressing really, because when I was working in any boxes in the street, the attitude that we got from the public was that we were wasting our time. And it was quite annoying for us anyway to have to keep repairing the same boxes day after day. And yet the attitude was generally, you're wasting your time. By the time you leave, half an hour later, it'll be gone again, it'll be damaged and broken again. And we started a big boost at the beginning of the year, and the boxes are now, as you know, about 95% working at any one time. And there's a big improvement now in the reaction from the public. They've realised that they are working, and they actually go to the box knowing that it's going to work, or they're quite convinced it will.
Certainly a payphone that works is going to earn more money than a payphone that doesn't work.
Absolutely. It does go wrong a little more often too, because the more coins you put in it, the more likely it is to go wrong, but it certainly earns a lot more.
If BT are capable of getting 95% of their payphones to work, why did they allow the problem to occur in the first place? Alfie Kane, DGM Manchester, gave me an honest answer.
I think that's probably a good example of not applying a quality team management, which we talked about earlier. You'll be familiar with the red box and familiar with the grey telephone that was inside it, which was a standard fixture in the UK for many years. We decided to modernise our payphone business, and we didn't design, plan and implement all the associated aids that are necessary, in fact, to make that a successful launch. For example, our training, the tools, the documentation. We didn't do those in a quality manner, and the end result of those failures was having a public service that was far from satisfactory, with only about 70-odd% of the payphones working at any one time.
But couldn't the BT engineer on the spot have told you that you were asking for trouble?
Yes, they clearly were aware that there were problems, and it has to be said that on many occasions they did complain and report up the line that there were problems at the coalface. And
the message was not received?
No, the message was not received in a way that led to corrective action and led rapidly to corrective action. So it's another lesson I think we've got to learn as managers in the business, the lesson of listening.
We've done a lot on training staff to cope with the box, and you can see that in the results. And we're beginning to get good quality enhancements out into the field, bringing the fault rate down very dramatically. So I think we're on top of that problem now.
And at the very top of it all, Ian Vallance feels a certain pride in what's been done.
We made a very specific promise on the serviceability of our payphones, that we would get at least 98% serviceability by March 1988, and we bettered that. And we're very proud of that, frankly, because it's a good example of what BT can do once it puts its mind to doing it. And in fact, if you look at our report and accounts this year, you will see that on the front page there's a photograph of a modern payphone. And that's there, and that we deliberately made that the photograph for the report because we are proud of what we did with payphones.
Now that our payphones are working, how do they compare with America, where it all began? In New York, roughly 90% of the payphones are working at any one time. On the other hand, New York, one city, has more payphones than the whole of Britain. So come with me just across the river from New York, and let's try phoning back to Manhattan via an AT&T long line. Everyone says how good the American telephone system is, but there can be a few problems when you're dealing with payphones. In the first case, they only take small coins. So that's a great worry if you're calling long distance. And long distance here can be quite a short distance. So you've got to have a bucket full of small coins or a credit card. Now, I'm trying to reserve a table in the restaurant at the top of the World Trade Center over there. Windows on the World, it's the one on the left. How much do you reckon it would cost to call from here to there?
Please deposit 70 cents for the first 1 minute.
Please deposit 70 cents for the first 1 minute. That's 40 pence just to call from here to there.